everyone, and welcome back to Random Alien Brain Droppings. I'm Suzanne Chancellor, and tonight's show, I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and that is talking about the experience and how it relates to the consciousness. I think it's really easy for all of us to sit back and say, wow, look at this video, or I read this really great book about UFOs, or there's a really great documentary. There are so many out there that are really catching our attention. But how often do we actually take a step back and say, hey, wait a minute, not necessarily the UFO should be the important thing, but maybe it's why it's happening and what's connected to it. And throughout my research, based on my own experiences, I've come to a commonality with a lot of my contactee interviews. And I found that many of them have gone from their, I'm going to say, trauma or their traumatic abductee scenario situations and realizing that there is something more to all of this. And instead of taking those experiences and dwelling on the negativity, are taking something positive out of it and applying it to their lives. Now, I've also found that many of them have felt some sort of connection with these other beings. We don't really know maybe concretely what they are. Are they real? Are they physical beings that actually come to us in the night or during the day, contacting our families? But are they another part of the consciousness? Are they actually possibly interdimensional beings coming to us to give us a message and to stray us on a path to help us, enlighten others? So tonight's guest is somebody that I have connected with via the social media, which I'm very grateful for that connection. Her name is Debbie Tripp, an experiencer, and has a lot to share with us when it comes to the connection between the experience and alternative healing. So Debbie, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
I'm good, Suzanne. It's nice to be here. Thanks so much.
I'm really, really happy to have you tonight. So why don't you let the listeners know a little bit about you and your background. I take it you're living somewhere in the Midwestern part of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in the Southeast. So, yes.
Great. And why don't you tell the listeners, you told me a little bit about your journey. What I think is quite interesting is the things that you've shown me in your email were that the experiences seem to be pretty recent, which I think is pretty interesting because a lot of my interviews have dealt with people who've had lifelong experiences. Now, that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't had them, but your real recollections that seem very, very big, very, very intense seem to be very recent, and which is interesting since we've had this whole shift in the 2012 and all that. We tend to think that there might be some sort of an awakening happening here. So I'm thinking that for you and being as you are involved in alternative health practices, that might apply to you as well. So could you share with us maybe a little bit about those experiences?
Sure. My first memorable experience happened in November of 2011, and it was your typical spaceship with the beam of light. It sounds so cliche, but that's what it was, where I was looking up at a ship suddenly, and I could feel beings around me, but I couldn't see them. And the beam was sucking me up into the ship, and I felt inside as if I was fighting it. And I heard a male voice telepathically say, "Now, Debbie, just relax. You know we need to do this." And I kind of just let it go. I just relaxed everything. And it felt as if I had done it 100 times before. And I was like, okay, here we go again. And as soon as I did that, everything went black. And I have no memory of what happened after that until I woke up. And I say woke up, I don't know what that means, but came to in a panic. And it was early in the morning, and I had called my husband in a panic. I mean, I never really remember my dreams, and I don't recall having that many nightmares in my life. So for me to call him and be so shaken from that, and he had been taking our daughter to school. And I'm like, you need to come home as soon as possible. I'm freaking out here. And so he calmed me down, and I pretty much chalked it all up to a dream. And then a few months later, in January of 2012, is when I had an experience where I had been reading. My daughter was sleeping between my husband and myself, and they were asleep. And I had just shut my light off and put the book away, and I was settling down to sleep, and I heard a noise in my living room. We have a few doors that come into our bedroom. So I heard a noise in the living room, and then I heard a noise in the kitchen. And I went to wake my husband up, which is what I normally do in those types of situations when you hear a noise in the house. And as I went to talk to him, I could not move. I was completely paralyzed. And the only thing that seemed to move were my eyeballs. And I was fighting that paralysis. I heard this incredible hum in my right ear, very, very low, not unpleasant, but you couldn't, it was very loud. And then the whole room had blue lights coming in through the doors and the windows. And I could hear scurrying, like a bunch of little people running around. When I kind of rolled my eyeballs to my right, where my husband was sleeping, that's when I saw a being that looked like your typical gray alien that you see in the movies, except he was glowing blue. It was an electric cobalt type of a blue color. And I remember, even though I was horror stricken, taking note of that, like, well, how odd is that? It's, it was amazingly glowing with this blue color. And I was also thinking, oh my goodness, that dream that I had in November was not a dream. It was just a confirmation, because I was wide awake when this happened. Mm-hmm. And just as I'm starting to panic, everything goes blank again. Now, my clock is straight ahead in our bedroom, and I don't sleep well at night. So I'm always conscious of the clock and the time. And about an hour had gone by when that incident was happening, even though it just felt like a few seconds. Then in February, so even though it was scary, it's like, if I had seen a ghost or an angel, it's almost as if my brain could wrap around that a little mm-hmm. easier mm-hmm. than something that seemed extraterrestrial or interdimensional or multidimensional, however you want to refer to it, because mm-hmm. We don't know for sure. But then in February, I had a dream. And it was it was just a funky dream of being in a house, and there were lots of rooms in the house, and every room we were moving into it, and every room we were going into, there were people there, and the rooms kept going on and on and on. And we were like, well, I guess we're just going to be living with a bunch of people. And I wake up from the dream, and I wanted to analyze it, but instead this telepathic message came through out of nowhere. And I knew immediately to write it down. And I had my cell phone by the bed, so I grabbed the little notepad on the cell phone. And the quote said, "Organized religion and dogma complicates the evolution of our soul.
Wow.
Pure love and simple heart truths gently moves us in our ascension process." I could not have come up with that, especially upon waking, especially after a funky dream like that I was all ready to analyze. And I thought, my goodness, that did not come from me.
Wow.
Where did that come from?
Right.
So, and I've had several, and I would refer to that as a minor, the November and January experiences to me were major. Everything else I refer to as minor. I've had the vision of being in front of a council of beings with a hooded being, mm-hmm. and she was female. Wow. And I couldn't see her face. And she in this vision kept saying, "Listen to the eagle, follow the eagle. His wisdom is not new. It is very ancient. Listen to the eagle." And I'm thinking, why does she keep repeating herself? I've got it. Okay. What does it mean? I don't know. I still don't know.
Wow.
But she was very clear about it. And then I had another experience where we had gone to the movies with my daughter, and they showed the Smurf preview. And I jokingly said to her, "Oh, maybe my blue guy was a Smurf," referring to the little gray alien in my room. And that night, I had another experience where this holographic looking brain was kind of just floating in front of my face. And again, it was a female voice. And she said, "You need to pay more attention to your Smurf.
Oh, what?
Listen to your Smurf."
I'm
And
sorry for laughing.
that's okay. I mean, it
You
is
must have had a
funny.
chuckle with that one, right?
Huh?
You must have had a chuckle with that one. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
did she really know how could she know what a Smurf is?
Clearly, they either are monitoring our thoughts
Right.
or words, or
That makes
uh,
sense.
and either they have a sense of humor or they're taking what we say very literally.
Hmm.
So if she thought that I really thought, "Oh, that's my Smurf that showed up in my room that night," her message is, whether I look at it as a Smurf or
Hmm.
an alien or light being, to listen to it and spend more time with it.
Right. And the curiosity, maybe that's almost like not like a figurative statement as well.
Mhm.
Pay more attention to what it is that you don't know.
Yes.
Or for now, I think it's really interesting. I had to have a chuckle myself when you
Hmm.
said the Smurf,
Hmm.
because I had the same exact experience. And the only thing that I could explain it to be was a blue Smurf.
Hmm.
Now,
Amazing.
you are not the only other person that I've heard this from
Wow.
about these little beings.
Yeah.
Another one is Whitley Strieber.
Hmm.
He had a blue being like that as well come to him. I do also believe there were three. Now, there were three with me,
Hmm.
and that experience involved my daughter, and it also involved a telepathic message.
Hmm.
So it's how could it be coincidence that we're all having these analogous situations and
Yeah.
they're all presented to us in the same manner? Excuse me.
Right.
Now you said you saw a ring and you had this telepathic message. Now, when you were getting this telepathic message, were
Hmm.
you aware of any one particular person or being, I should say, that it was actually coming from?
No, it was a
No.
male voice.
Oh, really?
That was a male voice. The voice when I was sucked up into the ship was a male voice.
Hmm.
But the holographic brain and the wise woman, with the hooded being, was a female voice.
Wow.
Yeah. So they seem benevolent,
Hmm.
and I always stress to people that although it was hard to wrap my mind around, and it is scary. I mean, when you can't move, I mean, when I boil it down, that was the biggest thing, was not being able to move. But I can understand why they would do that. It's probably best for me and for them,
Right.
and because
Right.
I've heard a lot of people who wanted to, kick them and punch them and,
And no, and not only wanted to, but have.
yeah, yeah.
I've heard that as well. We'll
Hmm.
talk about that in a bit because that's something else about this phenomenon that I think of late has been very interesting, finding out um, how people are trying to fend off their attackers.
Hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with fear.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask you, you're saying that you got this message and it was very telepathic and it was a direct statement that you could not have even dreamt up per se. It seemed
Hmm.
like it was actually coming from a source, an energy
Yes.
source or an energy being.
Hmm.
Now it seemed really direct, and with the same experience that I had that involved these little blue Smurfs,
Hmm.
right before they came into my bedroom, I had a visitation from a female that just manifested next to my bed, and I couldn't move. And all I could move was my eyeballs, which
Hmm.
is interesting. You're saying so many similarities to my experience and others as well, where you do have
Hmm.
the paralysis,
Hmm.
but we have the ability to move our eyes, which I think is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Why would that be?
I don't
You can
know,
see
unless
things
they
in your
want us to
periphery.
see. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she said to me, now telepathically again, I was engaged to be married at the time, and she said to me, "Where I come from, marriage is the most sacred part of our existence, and I am giving you the opportunity to experience that if you choose."
Wow.
Now, where did that come from? Why are we getting these messages?
Right.
And it was so direct. And again, why would I be thinking that in the middle of a quote unquote dream, which
Right.
seemed like a three-ring circus at that point, but you know what I mean? With all
Yeah.
the energy and happenstance happening in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are these messages? And they're giving to us so eloquently in a sense, and they're really
Yes.
impressing something on us. Do not forget. Pay attention to the Smurf.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what do you make of all this as far as those communications are concerned?
Well, I definitely think they are given to us specifically as a reason. Maybe they know, we don't know our future. Maybe they know our future. Maybe they knew you and I would be having this conversation and it would reach a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that the messages are anything we haven't heard before in some other capacity. Um, the uniqueness is, I mean, I'm 45 years old. I've never had anything like that happen. I've always been very spiritual and very open, and I've never had anything like that happen. There's just something, my awakening truly started happening in 2009 when I started seeing numbers, certain number sequences, like the 1111 and the 333. And I didn't know what it was then. Looking back, and I still see them, and I see more numbers, different sequences now that I feel are codes. And I feel like every time we look at them, it is doing something to this brain of ours, to this program, to this DNA, whatever you want to call it. I don't know how it's working, but I think there's a reason. Because again, in all of my years, I don't recall seeing number sequences like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a reason. So just like with the quotations we're getting, for whatever reason, the people that are getting them are getting them, and hopefully we're meant to spread them for some
Right.
reason. And then that's, part of the reason that I'm, I've had issues with coming out of the closet with all of this.
Mm.
And I can't help but wonder with what I'm doing and the messages that are coming through, that we're supposed to let people know. We talked about people having good experiences and bad experiences. Some people have bad experiences. And I don't think the people having good experiences negate that.
Mm.
I think there's all sorts of energy and beings out there. Mine, I believe I would err on the side of positivity with my particular situation, even though I still suffer from anxiety.
Mm.
And I would definitely say I have post-traumatic stress from those situations that have happened. But I also have tools to help myself that are working. And some people keep it together with these experiences and some people don't. And I'm trying to be one of those that does keep it together for myself and for other people. Just like you're trying to help abductees, so am I, because I don't want people to go through that fear.
Right.
And not knowing what is this.
Right.
I had no interest in UFOs or aliens or any of that before this happened. And I've kind of it's been thrust upon me into this, human life we're living and these earth suits that we're wearing.
Mm.
And, we're making the best of it. And I think we are keen enough to see, okay, when you get a quotation like that, that certainly isn't just for me. That's just not just for me. It's that people should hear that.
Mm.
And maybe it's the fact that it's not something a human made up. I didn't make up that saying. Most of what we hear, you hear it from people who are speakers, people like Deepak Chopra and Oprah. People, you expect to hear that stuff from them.
Exactly.
And again, it's not to diminish what they're saying because they say
Right.
wonderful things. But I think when your average everyday person like myself gets a message like that from something else, from somewhere else, that's not human. There's a reason for that.
What did you get from that message for yourself personally? I mean, obviously you wrote this down, and upon looking at it again, did you look at it and say, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I mean, how can I take this literally? Or is it like a metaphor for something else? Have you ever thought about trying to see how it applies to you? Because it was obviously meant for you. It was directed at you. And yes, definitely to spread some sort of a message.
Well, what it says, certainly agree with what it says. And that's not to say I'm not a highly spiritual person, but there is a difference between spirituality and religiousness and dogma.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that already. That was not new news to my brain. So I loved the eloquence of, pure love and simple heart truths. That just, gently moves us. I mean, those are words are just so lovely in how they're put together. I felt very loving energy from it. It was a wow moment, but it was one of those gentle wow moments, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, just that all encompassing, loving moments.
Right.
Um, so that's what I felt from it, and I completely agreed with it.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, as you should. I mean, it was
mhm,
obviously, you were saying a couple minutes ago how even though your experiences have not been malevolent,
mhm,
um, as much as you can recall to
mhm,
present day,
right.
you still do have some PTSD in regards to the experience because
Mhm,
I think, it doesn't really matter if it's good or bad. It's just so different and so odd. It's something we still don't have any control over, whether it was a negative physical abduction scenario or
mhm,
a visitation for something that you cannot explain. You're still going to have some sort of stress from that because it's something that's beyond your control. And
yeah.
just to know that you don't have that 100% control of your own, I'm going to say physical body as we know it here on Earth. I mean, there are certain, laws of nature that we
Mhm,
all live in. And one of them is we are human physical beings that are inhabiting this planet.
mhm,
Okay. And therefore, there are certain moral codes that we abide by. One of them is, you know, that we have to not abduct somebody against their will
mhm,
or invade their private space even, whether it be consciously or what have you. That's how we've been taught from
mhm,
small children to believe by our parents, our teachers, our clergymen, just, everyday life.
mhm.
And here this happenstance occurs where it's just completely like something that is out of a movie, like you said before.
Yeah.
And it is traumatic because you
Mhm.
realize the complexity of what is real. I mean, what is really real at that point?
Right. Well, and just the whole uncertainty of when are they going to do this again?
Mm.
Are they going to do this to my little girl and my husband? Um, and the whole question at that time of, are they good? Are they bad? Because, at that time, I didn't have enough evidence that they were truly benevolent. Um, it's that uncertainty, and you feel powerless, helpless. I felt a little hopeless because I thought, oh my goodness, if, I wondered for a moment, can you even escape it when you die?
Mm.
You
Wow.
know, really, because it was just one of those, oh my goodness, is this the way things are?
Mm.
And people just don't know or don't remember, because supposedly it is happening to millions of people
Mm.
and they just don't remember. Um, I've heard that the people that are remembering, they are allowing to remember for a reason. So is it true? I don't know.
I thought it was interesting that you had this message come to you from this woman, and I'm sorry, it was actually a male voice that you heard telepathically, correct?
Yes, that loving quotation was the male voice.
Okay.
Hmm.
And the woman that said that to me was saying something that I thought was very relevant also. But for me, I did feel that since I was engaged to be married, that it was a direct message for me. But at the same time, I thought she was talking about together as a populace. It was almost like
Hmm.
where they came from, marriage was the most sacred part of their existence. And she was giving me the chance to experience that. Now, I think that she was impressing on me when I looked back at that little quotation was the fact that us humans do not take marriage sacredly.
True.
And so I thought that was very interesting since I
Hmm.
was engaged to be married. So it made me rethink my whole situation, my own personal situation. But then I started looking at it as a populace. I thought, well, wait a minute. Well, what is the divorce rate
Hmm.
and why? So I don't know. For some
Yeah.
reason, felt that, like you said, this was something to be shared in a way, and to
Hmm.
keep remembering those types of messages.
Yeah. And when you think about marriage, marriage is a union. And so when you talk about the populace, maybe she was talking about the whole collective consciousness unifying. Um, I don't know. It depends on how literally we try to take it, or, I think it's natural to try to say, oh gosh, was that literal? Was it for me? Was it for everybody? Is it figurative? Is it, what context do we put it in? Um, but I think any reason you come up for what she said to you is a good thing. Like, no matter whatever your conclusion or my conclusion or any of the listeners, it's still a good message. Like, they're going to get a positive message from it.
And
Whether,
it stops to make us think.
yeah.
We were talking about a little bit about your experiences,
Hmm.
and we were talking about these messages that you had gotten telepathically and how they might relate to you personally and maybe collectively, and
Hmm.
how we should really pay attention to these things and utilize them as maybe tools to try and change our present state. I really feel that to be quite true for myself.
Hmm.
How do you feel about that?
I think so. I mean, I can absolutely say I'm not the person that I am today that I was before these experiences. I have become very different. And ironically, I feel more grounded. Um, it's a very stable, grounded feeling in regard to doing alternative healing. The clients that I have coming to me, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years. The people that I have now, and how my modalities that I use have changed, are vastly different than 6 months ago, even. I mean, it's amazing.
That's great.
The conversations that we have are not conversations that we had 6 months in prior. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
And what's interesting is I'm not initiating the conversations.
Mm.
These conversations that usually end up becoming about high strangeness, um, they are initiating it. So
Mm.
something is happening to make them feel safe with me to discuss them. And the fact that they are now also having these experiences,
Mhm.
their experiences are also very recent.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
So that's interesting. So in a way, maybe we need to pay attention to these synchronicities and high strangeness, because I think a lot of people have them, but they don't know
mhm,
how to address it in their normal life.
right.
And when somebody else starts talking about it and saying, this happened to me,
Hmm.
it makes them be aware of their own situation, and they feel comfortable to say, hey, wait a minute, that happened to me too. And so they come to their own self-realization as well. Maybe
Hmm.
you're, in a way, some sort of a conduit for that sort of information.
It could be. I don't know. I've just been letting it unfold and trying to listen to the universe and roll with it.
Yes.
I mean, I've been really good at listening. I've heard the saying that synchronicity is confirmation. So if that is true, there has been so much synchronicity
Yes.
that I am listening, and I'm kind of just walking through the doors that open and trying to fulfill the mission, whatever the mission is,
Right,
because there
right.
is a feeling of mission. I don't know if you
Yes.
feel that as
Yes.
well.
Oh my gosh, I have that in my notes. Do you
Hmm.
have a sense of mission? That is
Yes.
one of my next questions. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a sense of mission and there is an urgency. And
Mm.
frankly, I have felt the sense of mission since I was a child. And of course, looking back, with everything that's unfolded, I do feel there were things going on when I was a child,
Talk
which,
about that.
well, I was a sleepwalking child, which isn't uncommon. But I would sleepwalk in the middle of the night, like between midnight and 3 or 4 in the morning. We lived on a dead end street, and we had a very large backyard. And the home next to us had a huge field in the back that was very overgrown. Um, I wouldn't have thought much of it. I knew my whole life that I was a sleepwalker. my dad had to put locks up on top of the doors to try to keep me in the house. And they would find me out, going toward my backyard or the back field of the neighbor. And recently, my mother started telling me about our neighbor across the street, who she referred to as Crazy Patty, who's now long deceased. But she used to sit up on her roof every night in her nightgown, waiting for the ships to come. And
that's what she said. She was waiting for the ships to come.
That's what she said.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And my parents are now in their 80s, and they're very they don't want to believe in this type of thing, even though they themselves have had several sightings. Okay. Wow. So yeah. So what's interesting is, Crazy Patty, she'd sit up on the roof, and she had a tiny little yard. And I said to my mother, well, where were they landing? And she said, oh, they were landing in the field next to ours, across the street. And I'm like, in what direction was I walking when I was sleepwalking as a child? And they're like, in that same direction.
Okay.
So to me, that is odd.
Well, wouldn't they think that was odd?
I don't think they want to think that that's odd. I don't think they want to know that this is happening.
Right. There is some sort of denial associated with this when you talk to your parents, I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's, not just their age, but also the fact that something could have been happening to their little girl and they didn't know, and maybe couldn't protect her from that. There could be some of that going on. I don't know. But I remember also feeling, a hand touch me on the shoulder. That was not my parents. I remember seeing one of my dolls moving off of my bed. I remember being afraid in my closets and my windows. So there were several things that when I look back and I try to connect the dots, I was a very spiritual child, like abnormally so, and my parents were not. So it was odd that I would have that. It just, I was very intuitive from my childhood. That's definitely increased, I'd say, in the last few years. But yeah, I do think this has probably gone on since being a little child.
I've heard that seems very common with a lot of my interviews of experiences where they feel like they had, like you said, not only a sense of mission, but some sort of a heightened spirituality, and maybe even wanting to be religious because they had no other way to relate it to anything else. It was more of a, when you thought about spirituality, you always thought about religion as a child. And I was highly brought up in a religious household as a child as well. But then when I was probably about 7 years old, my father decided that we weren't allowed to go to church anymore. And he became an atheist. Wow. Which I didn't, it was just like so bizarre to me. But I still wanted to go to church. But I thought, how can I go to church if I don't go with my parents? So as a small child, I was finding neighbors to go to church with because I always had to have that sense of spirituality in my life. Yeah. And I had no other way of getting that around me unless I left my home. So that's interesting. Yeah, well, and my parents, they were Catholic, but they weren't churchgoers, and they didn't shove anything down my throat. I wanted to go to this particular Baptist church in my town for whatever reason. They took me there from the time I was 3. They would take me, bring me into my little classroom, pick me up. What's interesting is, in the Baptist religion, they don't have little figurines of Jesus and Mary. I needed to have figurines. And my mother had little Jesus and Mary and angel figurines. And I had an altar in my room as like a elementary school, like 5-year-old to 7-year-old kid. I had that all set up and I would sit there with them and meditate on it. Wow. Yeah. And I can remember doing that. And I just look back and I think, why was I led to do that? And like you said, maybe it was just the only way my mind could relate what was happening. Because it felt like maybe there was something otherworldly going on. Yeah. And the only thing that we knew as children that was otherworldly was God. And so that was the only way we could relate to something that wasn't of this physical earth. There was something else always out there.
Yeah.
And so we always were taught to pray. Okay. And that again, having prayer is so close to, having meditation,
Hmm.
no matter if it's with another entity or a way of thinking or higher self, even your
Hmm.
higher consciousness, possibly.
Yeah.
I think it's all related to the same thing.
Hmm.
Now, there was something else I wanted to ask you, and I think that it's really good to talk about because I think a lot of experiencers that might be listening to the show might have a lot of questions in regards to how you deal with this when you're involved in a relationship with somebody who is not an experiencer.
Hmm.
I'm not quite sure if your husband or any ex, I don't know, boyfriends or what have you that were in your life were experiencers, but how did they accept this?
Well, my husband that I currently have,
That you currently
I've
have?
been by my current husband as opposed to my ex-husband because I have a
Right.
story about my ex-husband.
Okay, great.
But my husband now, is just a godsend. I've been so impressed with how supportive he is. Because when this happens, you think, am I crazy? You go to that point and then you think, oh my goodness, if I'm crazy, is my husband going to stay with a crazy woman? Um, so, he helped me to realize, you're not crazy. He has experienced, that drunken feeling you get after experiences because we've tried to talk, after the experiences. And it's as if both of us have been drugged and we can't have a conversation right after it happens. So that's very interesting.
Hmm.
He was with me, after the first experience, I felt very led to go sit in a field. And one night, me and my husband and my daughter went to a nearby field and we were sitting there, had the windows open. We were there about 20 minutes and nothing was really happening. And I'm thinking, oh, this was just ridiculous. I don't know. What was I thinking? Well, right then I got this stabbing feeling in my left eye. Like it felt like someone had stuck a needle in my eye. And I actually grabbed my eye and I was like, ouch, what is that? And it lingered. And I got very cranky and I said, let's just go home. And we went home. It was like I couldn't make it to the bed fast enough. I needed to go to sleep. So it felt almost like I had a shot of a sedative.
Hmm.
Um, in the 10 minutes it took to go from the field to the house, my husband said, gosh, you got so cranky. And it was like you just had to get in the bed. And he's never seen me do that before. In the 11 years we've been together, he's never seen that. I have woken up. He had gone out of town for 5 nights, and that was a very stressful time for me because even though I know he's helpless when things are happening, it's comforting for me to know he's there after. And so I had asked the beings telepathically as best I could, please give me a break.
Hmm.
Please don't come see me during these 5 nights. And I don't believe they did. And the night my husband got home, I said, okay, the portal's back open. Just don't scare me. Just be nice and don't scare me. The next day, it was later in the day, and I was talking to my mom on the phone, and I was kind of touching my left leg, and I felt these little bumps. And there was a perfect triangle of bumps, three bumps. Uh, and I took
Oh.
a picture of it. And so my husband has seen that. And he,
Hmm.
he knows what I had said about, kind of jokingly opening the portal back up. So he's witnessed those types of things.
Hmm.
And he knows that in all the years we've been together, you know, we've never been interested in this topic. Um, and he knows I've always been very spiritual and it's just not a topic that came up. So he has seen those things and witnessed those things and is very supportive of what I'm going through. Um, there's been nights I just really need him to hold me. I have to sleep with a light on every night now. I've kind of become afraid of the dark. Um, and so I have a salt lamp, which puts off just the right amount of light into the room that it doesn't bother anybody else. But it's there. It gives a nice glow so that I can see around me and it feels comfortable.
Hmm.
So, he's real sensitive to all that. And I'm thankful.
You should,
So,
yeah, definitely be thankful for that because it's not a very common thing to have somebody
Right.
who is supportive. And obviously it sounds like in your past that you did have a situation that was very much like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I had a situation with my ex-husband where we were driving to a 3-hour destination that we had done many, many times. And it's exactly 3 hours. We got there in 2 hours and we could not figure it out. We could not figure it out. And it was something we talked about for a long time. And I'm sure he still remembers this as well. And it's always stuck in my head. I never chalked it up to anything supernatural until these experiences started happening. And you hear about missing time, but then there is the sped up time thing as well. And so I don't know. I don't know what happened, but it was not supposed to be the way it was. So, and
As
we
far as
both,
we know what it really is that is supposed to
right.
be. That's the hard thing to try and decipher, this whole time code. It seems that when there
Hmm.
is missing time or sped up time, or with obviously with your research as well, I'm
Hmm.
sure you found that we don't really know what these entities really are. And if they're not the physical little gray beings that we see in the movies,
Hmm.
and if it's something else completely, then who knows what they're able to do,
Right.
coming in and out of our time, our reality into this
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
and changing our environment to suit theirs, or what have you. We don't even know.
Right.
Now, do you have any children?
I have my one daughter. She's
And
9.
oh, okay, so I mean, does she know anything about your experiences at all?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, we're a very close family. And I think the trauma that I went through in the beginning, it was hard to hide that from her. So she knows about my anxiety and she always tries to make me feel comfortable. I talk to her regularly about, are you scared? Do the things I say scare you? And it's almost like in those moments, she's trying to take care of me.
Mm.
She has had a couple of experiences on her own, and she was a little frightened during those. But it wasn't lasting. It didn't, where I have the anxiety issues, she does not. So, and I guess that's the blessing of being a little child. I think you just,
Right, right. The
you know,
innocence of youth.
yeah, I mean,
There
and
is
they
something
live,
to be said.
yeah, they just live in that little imaginative world anyway. So, it's not a far stretch when they have an experience like that, I don't think. So,
That's true. But I mean,
yeah,
have you ever felt anything very odd about anything she said, or do you think that she might have been involved in any of your experiences up to this point?
I don't think she's been involved in any of my experiences. Um, her, I don't know. I'm still trying to, at her age, she's so into the computer. It's hard to figure out what's going on with her on a spiritual level or an extraordinary level. When she was much younger, like 3 or 4, I can remember I would get headaches and she would automatically start doing Reiki on me. She would just come out and she knew, she had watched me do it. So she would put on the Reiki music on my phone and come up and just put her hands on my head and hold my head. And it was just so loving and gentle and came from such a pure place. Whereas at this age, I'd have to actually ask her probably 10 times to please do that.
Put
Whereas
down the
before
computer.
yeah. But before it was just a natural thing for her to emit some healing energy when somebody would need it. So I thought I like looking back on
I
those
think that's
days.
beautiful. I mean, how many children actually do Reiki on their parents?
Right. Without
Wow,
being asked. I mean, she just
exactly,
naturally did it.
exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this awakening that you've had.
Hmm.
And I think it's something that we don't really address. And maybe a lot of people don't want to talk about it because it's so personal when you get into your own self journey, and you're trying to make sense of your life and make sense of these experiences that have happened to you, and instead of going into that dark place that a lot of people do.
Hmm.
And I found that to be true for a lot of people, where they just either they medicate themselves or they get into a deep depression.
Hmm.
They become very isolated because they
Hmm.
don't know how to relate to anybody else, or even just have a normal conversation with somebody without bringing up this experience.
Yeah.
And if you're not an experiencer, I know that you know how hard it is to be matter of fact about it because, I mean, for me, it's involved my whole life. And I have kept it a deep, dark secret for very long.
Hmm.
And it's been quite a journey. And I'm surprised that I have not gone down that road. But I found that meditation,
Yeah.
once I started going into my own self-realization
Hmm.
and saying, I need to connect with whoever it is that's trying to connect with me because I know it's something, I know it's someone or something or whatever.
Hmm.
And I stepped out of the box. I stepped out of my personal comfort zone and I said, okay, give me the message. What is my path? I
Hmm.
know I have a path. I feel the sense of mission. I feel a sense of urgency as well, just like you said.
Yeah.
For you, what spawned you to say, okay, I need to start meditating about this?
Well, I think, meditation is the only way to try to communicate. When you get into a quiet place and alter your brainwave patterns to try to communicate. And on those days that I have a good meditation, it's often that night that I'll get a message. Um, so, you know, and I've actually been led to teach meditation from this. And I am now teaching a meditation class in my neighborhood. And we had 21 people sign up for
Wow.
this first meditation class that we did a couple of weeks ago, and they can't wait till the next one.
Excellent.
So I think teaching others also how to get into that place is going to help them in so many, areas of their life. But if people are starting to have awakenings, that's a great place to start having an awakening is when you're inside yourself.
Right.
When you can get in there and listen. Because, I always tell people that, prayer, we're talking to God. Meditation, we're listening to God or whoever the source is. It's those, a lot of experiencers have experiences as they're falling asleep or as they're waking. And, there's that school of thought of, well, they're in a hypnagogic or a hypnopompic state, and that's what's creating it. And I kind of feel like, but maybe that's the best time to communicate with them
Hmm.
is when their brain waves are altered in those states. That's the best time for whatever beings to come through and do what they've got to do or to say what they've got to say to us.
Right. And we don't have any distractions. Okay.
Right.
We're completely lucid. We're in this
Hmm.
space where we are connecting on a totally different level
Hmm.
of our brain. I mean, what do
Yeah.
we really know about the brain? How does the human brain really work?
Right.
And that being said, what do we really remember?
Hmm.
So when we do these meditations, I found for myself that um, you're right, and I nodded a lot when you were talking about having the meditation and having a visitation on the
Hmm.
same day. I mean, wow, you're the first person that I've talked to that said that because it kind of freaked me out. That was my last physical visitation from the grays was when I
Hmm.
first started meditating.
Wow.
And but the really interesting thing about that situation was it was the one time in my life that I'd ever had a visitation from them
Hmm.
that I was not frightened.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, obviously it's related in some way, but I had no fear. I
Yeah.
had absolutely no fear whatsoever. And I think that I was connecting to that, either if it's my higher self
Hmm.
or my higher consciousness. We talked about the super consciousness.
Hmm.
So then what are the beings then? Maybe we're the conduit for them to come into our reality by getting into that conscious space.
Yeah.
We're allowing them to come into our time frame, into our quote unquote time zone,
Hmm.
on this plane.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that you've had a lot of benevolent experiences and not really the traumatic sorts from these beings, which
Hmm.
is you're probably one of the only ones that I've actually spoken with that's had that happen to them.
Hmm.
And I think that maybe since you have tapped into that part of the conscious state and that conscious awareness, and as you said, getting into that meditative state and having the recognition of the third eye opening,
Hmm.
which is a whole other thing altogether right there that a lot of
Yeah.
people aren't aware about.
Right.
Um, that's something that I would really like to delve into because you mentioned Reiki earlier,
Mm-hmm.
talked about meditation, um, synchronicities, high
Mm-hmm.
strangeness. I think that, psychic abilities,
Mm-hmm.
precognition, all these things are connected.
Yeah.
And they're all, holding hands together because I've had that so much in my life, especially as I've gotten older and become aware of the higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I think that most of us who are experiencers, and those of you who are out there listening to the show and are also experiencers, if you feel that you have a connection to that part of you and your consciousness, I highly recommend that you delve into that a little bit further because I think that these are there for a reason, especially if you have a lot of synchronicity in your life and feel that there's something else out there other than this, which I do, and I think that Debbie can attest to as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, Debbie, again, thank you so much for coming forward. I mean, I know how hard it is to speak publicly about this, and I know that it's pretty new for you to be doing this, and I
Mm-hmm.
really have to say you're very brave.
Thank you.
No, honestly, I'm very, very proud of everyone who's contacted me
Mm-hmm.
since I started doing this show. I welcome anyone who's listening. If you feel the need that you need to speak your truth and share something with the world, no matter how small it is, everything is important. Things are happening now, and the time is now to be saying these things and speaking your truth. So please use this platform. Contact me at abducteeawareness@gmail.com or here at KGRA Radio anytime if you feel the need to connect. So, Debbie, you as an experiencer felt compelled to go somewhere where a lot of experiencers have not had the opportunity to or taken the advantage of delving into, and that is, alternative healing. And I know that you have gone into doing Reiki and are doing your meditation group, which is awesome. But I
Mm-hmm.
also noticed that you were doing some sort of sound therapy, and I really had a lot of questions about that because that's something that I have no real knowledge of. So could you please tell our listeners what that's all about?
Sure. The um, sound therapy is using sound and hence frequency to help balance our human bodies and our energy fields and our chakra systems. And we use tuning forks and singing bowls. Some people will even use didgeridoos and other types of drums, toning with the voice. So there's a lot of different ways to use sound therapy. And I had been in alternative health from the time I was 20. So my first 17 years, I was a massage therapist.
Oh, wow.
And I did massage and I did reflexology. And over those years, my back started to give out, my hands started to give out, and I kind of needed to be led to gentler practices. So that kind of, led me into doing what I'm doing. And the things that I do Reiki and I do the sound therapy and I do EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, and hypnosis. All of those are dealing with energy, our consciousness and our energy system. So the sound therapy, it's amazing how certain frequencies can affect the body in certain ways. And it's not just some new age hoopla. I mean, there's a lot of science behind sound therapy. Way back to Nikola Tesla. I mean, there's
Amen
just,
to that.
I know, we love Nick.
Yes.
But, it's the tones. And it's so fascinating to see somebody laying on the table and you'll do a certain tone. And sometimes I'll have a group of people all attracted to the same tone in the same week. And then other weeks it'll be a different tone that they seem attracted to. Um, I have people say, "Am I levitating off the table?" I've heard that several times where they actually felt as if they were floating off the table.
Wow.
They will see things. And I just love hearing the stories after a session. And what I do is in person, I combine the Reiki and the sound therapy and aromatherapy and crystal therapy. And I sage the person before we start. And it makes for just a lovely session that someone who can't meditate, it's kind of their time to get lost in themselves. And it's so fun to hear what they have to say afterwards. Um, so it's been, in a way, my situation with having a bad back and bad wrists has led me into, it just segued into this wonderful healing art where I combine all these things and it makes for a unique experience. It's not just a Reiki experience.
Right.
So yeah, that has been lovely. The sound therapy, it was like I was craving going through that training. I just had to go through that training. And I feel so blessed to have gone through it because I don't know many people that do sound therapy. A lot of people have tuning forks, but they haven't, gone through the training to use tuning forks or singing bowls. And it's a lovely thing, what it can do.
Yes.
So,
If I may interrupt right now,
mm-hmm.
I cannot tell you how many people have asked me, they say, I really, really want to start meditating,
Mm-hmm.
but they say they don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, what should I do? And I think it's a very personal experience, and I just do what's right for me. For those people out there who are listening right now, is there anything that you could give them, any sort of advice for them to learn how to meditate for themselves?
Sure. The first thing I would say is create a space in your home that is just for that. Find a corner, get some pillows, some cushions to sit on. So, with my back issues, I prefer to lay down. So I've got I've got a little back jack chair to sit on the floor. And I also have a zero gravity chair that I can lay in that puts me in a really nice position to I lay down with a heating pad and a blanket and an eye pillow, and I use some aromatherapy or light some incense, and it creates a space that will hopefully attract the energy you're looking to attract and kind of drown yourself into. Mm-hmm. So make a little space. Some people want to have, little figurines. If you're a Christian, you might want to have a cross or a little, Jesus picture on there. You might want to have a little Buddha or a Kuan Yin or, whatever you might want. It doesn't have to be a religious thing. And that's what I always try to tell people is, meditation is not necessarily a religious thing. It could be, you can make it that way, but it's really about tuning into yourself and not necessarily tuning out everything, because even hearing sounds and letting your mind wander can be a form of meditation. There are walking meditations. You can go find local labyrinths to go walk the labyrinth. You can do a Tai Chi video or a Qigong video. Mm-hmm. You can meditate while you're cooking.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different ways to meditate. You can meditate. There's tea meditations where you drink tea and you just kind of breathe and drink your tea for 10 minutes. And
right.
Yeah. And so you don't have to try so hard with everything.
I agree. And I think that people feel that it's some sort of a, there's a ritual, there's a, A, B, C, or D. I think it's a very personal thing. Like you said, you could meditate basically doing anything, whatever makes you feel the most comfortable, whether it be, like you said, cooking or anything. It's just really, I think it's more self-introspection as well. And just getting to that place to where you don't have any distractions and you just really delve into your own mind and your own consciousness and just be at one with yourself.
Yes.
And we don't do that often enough because we have way too many distractions out there. And I think those distractions are there for a reason, obviously. Because if they knew that we were in touch with not only ourselves, but our higher selves or whoever these beings are that are coming over here to guide us into having harmony here. Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said about people that might not want that to happen collectively. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And
because then they lose control.
Right. And, that kind of brings me to the third eye, my little third eye speech, if there's time for me to give that.
Do it.
Okay. Your third eye is your pineal gland, which is in the middle of your brain. Thousands of years ago, that gland was as big as a walnut. And now it's the size of a pea. And it's also calcified. And how did it get calcified? One of the main reasons is the fluoride that we have, the fluoride in our water, in our toothpaste. And of course, those are, man-made things. It also is naturally occurring in black tea. But what it does is it calcifies that gland. If you had an MRI or an X-ray of your head, you'd see that little glowing pea in the middle of your head. There are ways to decalcify it, and that would be staying away from fluoride, using a bentonite type of clay, the Indian clay, an Indian red clay, a teaspoon in some water. That helps. Taking Ethereum gold capsules can help. So there's different ways to do that. And of course, the most important, I think, is just staying off the fluoride. And I'm not a doctor, so make sure you check with your physician before
Well, I don't think
trying
there's anything
anything.
good about fluoride anyway, so I really don't think
Right.
you're doing anybody a disservice by saying that. I mean, I grew up in a generation where fluoride was just, I mean, I can't even imagine that
Hmm.
we're not glowing in the dark right now with all the
Yeah.
things that we went through as children in the 60s, okay?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, literally, fluoride was like the big deal back then. And I'm
Sure.
thinking, wow, so why was that? Really? Really,
Yeah.
people?
And
We
well,
need to
and
really listen.
in Nazi Germany, they gave large doses of fluoride to the Jews because it dumbs you down. It dumbs you down to where your intuition is not there anymore. So it's, your gland has shrunk, it's calcified. It didn't happen by accident. So I always tell people, start with cleansing yourself a little bit first, to open that third eye, because that is the seat of our soul. It's where we produce melatonin. It actually has a cornea on it. It's shaped like a pine cone, which is why it's called the pineal gland, and it has a cornea. Um, and I think I told you about when I meditated, just in the last several months. I'll be meditating with my eyes closed, and all of a sudden I can see the room in front of me.
I heard that.
Yeah, and it just in one time I had an eye pillow on, and it just blew my mind. I mean, it's kind of shocked me, and I had to sit up and whip off my eye pillow, and um, but yeah, I could just see the room clear as a bell.
Wow,
And
that makes me think about that old saying, your mama's got eyes in the back of her head.
yeah,
So what does that really mean?
I know. Yeah. So it's a powerful thing.
So once we start opening or cleansing our pineal gland, so then what can we expect after that?
I mean, my hope would be your intuition would increase. Being sensitive to the energies around you. Your meditation practice would hopefully be easier. Another thing too with the meditation is, if all else fails, if you're trying to meditate, download some guided meditations
Mm.
where there's a voice guiding you into the forest or into the stars, or those are wonderful. And studies have shown that with guided meditation, your stress level can drop 65%
Mhm.
just from listening to 10 or 15 minutes of a guided meditation.
I believe
So,
that.
yeah. So don't feel like you have to be sitting there with your eyes closed and concentrating on your breath and having your mind wander everywhere. Because like we talked about, there's lots of different ways to do it. And the guided meditation is a wonderful way to start, especially if you create that nice little sacred space for yourself and throw in your earbuds and just listen.
I love that. And I've been listening to a lot of the bowls, the Tibetan bowls.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
And even just the sound, that resonant sound of that, it's like
Yes.
you have no control. You
Hmm.
have to shut down.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about certain tones that just get you into that calm place. You have no control of it whatsoever.
Yeah. I have a set of tuning forks that they use in drug treatment because it can get you to the high place
Wow.
without taking a drug.
Wow.
I mean, sound is amazing. And, try the crystal singing bowls because, metal is heavy. And
Mm,
even though you still get good benefits from it, the crystal, that's what we're coming into, is that crystalline energy, that lighter, pure energy. Whereas metal is more associated with antiquity and old stuff. When you picture Tibetan bowls, you think of these old ancient bowls that, and when you buy them, the good ones are about several hundred years
they're
old.
very expensive, and they're also pretty expensive
Yes, yes. And
for a
so,
reason, though.
Right. And so think of all the energy that holds. And there's, they're definitely lovely. But yeah, try the crystal bowls because you'll feel that different energy shift. So,
Yeah, I definitely think that's a great idea.
mhm,
So I had a question for you in regards to when you had your awakening again with the third eye. Did
mhm,
you feel at that point when you started seeing things in a different light, per se,
mhm,
based on that awakening, these beings that had come to you? Now, a lot of us think that they are these physical, like I said earlier, the little grays that come in your room.
mhm,
But as far as them being like a conscious being,
mhm.
what do you think they are? Where do you think they come from? Why do you think they're here? What do you think the message is for you?
Well, on a tangible level, you know, I did see a ship, which would make you think the ship came from somewhere, right? Um, do they need a ship to travel interdimensionally? I wouldn't think so. Uh, but to appear in your room, could they just, you hear of the going through the walls and the ceiling. Um, I think they either really know how to manipulate matter or some portal is opening interdimensionally. I had one night I was laying in bed and I was talking to my daughter. We were wide awake, and there was just a little glow of light in the room. And in front of me, it looked as if the air was rippling. Like it was very obvious. And I asked her, "Do you see that?" And she could not see it. But the air was rippling. And I thought, wow, what is that? Is that a portal? Am I trying to see into a different dimension?
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it's almost as if the more you know, the more questions you have,
That's so true.
and that's okay. I mean, maybe that's what it's all about, is to make us start to pay attention.
Pay
And
attention,
yeah,
definitely.
I mean, because that gets your attention when you see rippling in front of you or a
How can
little
you
blue
deny it?
light,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah, how can you deny it? So it forces you, and it makes you curious. And
Mm.
I take that back. I think it either makes you curious or it makes you shut down.
Mm.
And I think the people not dealing well with their experiences are probably shutting down. Denial. Just like if you go through any unbelievable or traumatic experience, you're either going to deal with it or you're going to go into denial and shut down.
Right.
So when it's, fearful and you can't wrap your mind around it, it may be easy to shut down. And there's been days I thought maybe I just need to block it all out.
Right. Well,
Just
sometimes we need to take a break. I mean,
yeah.
literally, we can just befuddle ourselves with all this information and go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, as much as we like to try and do what we're doing and try and do this work, because I feel that you and I are both feeling compelled to do some sort of work,
Mm-hmm.
we still have a life to live. We still have families, we still have jobs, we still have,
Yes. Yeah.
to pay the bills. So,
Mhm.
there
Yeah.
there is some sort of like a sense of balance that has to be happening in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you let yourself get so overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the meditation comes in. That's where taking that break out of your
Yes.
day and reassessing your own self and tuning yourself,
Mm-hmm.
tuning your energy to where you can deal with whatever PTSD you have, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
The wonderful thing is that there are people like you who are offering these types of energy work for other people to try and stabilize themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also so many support groups now for, you know, people that are involved in the abduction scenario where they feel that they have no one to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Physically, they can go there and have a meeting. They can do it on the phone. They
Mm-hmm.
can call in to various radio shows that we do here at KGRA Radio.
Mm-hmm.
We all are now letting go of that fear
Mm-hmm.
and letting go of and like I said before, stating our name and saying, I am not going to be afraid to say this is me and this has happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is
Yeah.
my life and I have a right to. It's almost like you get angry in a sense.
Yeah.
You get angry and you say,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, okay, this happened to me. I had no control over it. Well, you know what? Screw it. I don't care anymore. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to, I've had people say to me, I really can't be on the show because I'm afraid. What if they come and, what if there's like a white van in front of my house and the men in black come or, you
Yeah, I've
know,
had those thoughts.
I know,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a totally normal fear. But you know what? I think the fear breeds the experiences to manifest. in a, totally malevolent way. For some reason, I feel that the more, when I look at certain people who are doing these shows, who are really into conspiracy theories and what have you,
Mm.
it seems like the more they delve into that, the more happens to them that is negative. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Well, yeah, it's like they're creating their reality. And
Exactly.
and I don't know about you, it seems like to me most of them are men.
I, well, I'm not gonna say anything. Let's get a mouth shut on that one,
It's
but
just an
but you're
observation. It
right.
seems like the women are kind of processing it well. Um, and the men are kind of, and it could just be the difference between the male and the female energy.
I think
Um,
that's the case.
and that's not to say all men. I'm just saying the certain men that I've come in contact with. You just hear these terrible stories, and they talk to you like you're living in a dream world.
Yeah.
They're not good. You
But
just think they're good.
don't you think these entities attract themselves a different type of energy? Male versus female energy for different reasons.
Yeah.
I found that a lot of male now, a lot more female experiencers are actually coming out and speaking like you. Most
Hmm.
of my guests as of late have been female.
Yeah.
But that being said, I also feel that a lot of men who are involved in this abduction scenario have been very combative.
Yeah. Which, it's their nature, I think, to do that. If somebody's coming at you, the guy's response is, I'm going to defend myself.
Right.
You
That's
know?
genetic. That's totally genetic, and it's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know what? I don't discount them for doing that because, I mean, I saw Terminator. I know how women can be pretty, domineering if they have to be, if they have to like fight for their life or what have you.
Hmm.
But in this situation, there is some sort of a more of a male dominant power sense of not control, but trying to protect, to
Hmm.
fight,
Yeah.
and but then again, I almost feel like it breeds for the visitations to increase in a negative manner.
Hmm. Yeah. And it could be, if these beings truly are energetic beings, and if they are playing off of our energy, I don't, I wonder how much control they have even over themselves. I don't know. But you hear, if you are, the whole secret philosophy, if you're putting out negative stuff, you're going to get negative stuff.
That's true.
If you're putting out positive stuff, you're going to hopefully get positive stuff. Now, does it apply to this subject? I don't know.
I don't either.
We just don't know. If we did, it wouldn't be so scary.
But if we address it and really start thinking about it, maybe those of us out there or those of you out there who are involved in this scenario might give that a think and think, wait a minute, if I look at this whole thing in a totally different light,
Hmm.
maybe the visitation experience will change.
Yeah.
Allowing ourselves to step outside of that, scenario and say, wait a
Hmm.
minute, I want this to be a certain way. I'm reading a book right now by a future guest who wrote a book about how to defend yourself against alien
Hmm.
abduction.
Yeah.
And I think that's very interesting because think a lot of people out there don't even think they have the control to do that. But there are tools that
Yeah.
we can use to prevent that from progressing
Hmm.
or from continuing as well.
Hmm. Well, and I've been told too that if they are benevolent, like when I needed that break while my husband was gone, and then there was a 2 week period where it was like every other night, and I was like, I need a break. I need a break. And that if you ask and they listen, that they are truly benevolent,
Mm,
that they're trying to work with you. I hope that's true.
you too.
Because whether that was just a psychological thing where I tricked myself into thinking they weren't communicating with
Right,
me, I
right.
don't know. But I know both of those times they did listen, and there was no contact during that time. Um, and then I always, at night, I always surround myself. And I say the words with the highest frequency of love and light. And I will make the statement, I attract only the highest frequency of love and light.
That's very
And
important.
that any other frequencies are not allowed.
Yeah.
So
That's
something like,
very important, I think, Debbie, that you say that. Because if
mm-hmm,
you open yourself up to everything, you never
mm-hmm,
know what's going to come into your
mm-hmm.
space. So,
Yes. Yeah. And I do that before meditation too. I make that statement very, very clear in my mind, and I, project it out there.
So
So
what do you think's happening? What do you think's happening with this elevation of our conscious awareness at this point?
I don't know. I just know we are hopefully listening and paying attention and stepping up to whatever we feel we're supposed to step into. Um, for myself, when I finished my hypnosis training, it was funny because we had this terrible cicada outbreak here, and it was, I think, 13 years ago, and I thought I will not be there during that time the next time it happens. And sure enough, I was. And so for 6 weeks, I had to lock myself in the house, and I thought, I'm going to finish this hypnosis course. And I finished the hypnosis course, and I finished later on, I had finished an advanced hypnosis course. And then I also did my EFT basic and advanced training. And I was so thankful for those cicadas because I thought it made me sit down and do it. And I'm so thankful because that EFT, I don't know if you're familiar with how that works, but that's working on the meridian system of the body. And the basis is that our unresolved negative emotions are major contributors to our pains and anxieties and things like that. And it's nothing more than disruption in our body's energy system.
Wow.
And so we tap it out while we're discussing something. And let's say the issue is fear, because I think fear and anxiety are the two things abductees feel. And what's so great about that is that's something I can do over Skype with people to help them through that.
Yes. So we're getting very close to the end of the show. So before we leave, you need to tell everybody how to contact you, because I know there are so many people out there listening right now that would love to connect on that level and have some work done. So how can I get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is through my website, which is www.glowtherapy.net. And or you can reach, my email is glowtherapytn@gmail.com. Those are the best ways to contact me. And I can teach them meditation through Skype. I can go through EFT sessions with them over Skype. And then I also offer distance Reiki.
Oh,
because
that's awesome.
Reiki energy does work at a distance.
It does. I've had that done to me, and I can attest 100% that it does work. So anybody out there who feels they have the need for any healing work or would like to know how to heal themselves as well, please contact Debbie. If you could just repeat those one more time for those who have not. And is that GLOW, Glow?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, GLOW.
So can you please repeat that again?
Therapy. www.glowtherapy.net.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And again, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight here at Random Alien Brain Droppings. And I wish you all the best with your energy work. And I'm so blessed to have made your contact so that I can actually spread this with other people. So,
oh, thank you. I'm blessed to have met you as well.
Oh, thank you so much.
And you're my first official interview, and I'm
so proud of you. So
thank you.
Everyone have a good night, and thanks for joining us. This is Suzanne Chancellor. See you next time. Have a good night.
Lost and hurt and lonely too. Are they bleeding on your colors into one? And if you come undone, as if you'd been run through some catapult.